series on sociological research method. In today's lecture, we're going to talk about R.K. Merton's understanding of the relationship between theory and research. And to keep in mind, for this lecture, we're going to refer to R.K. Merton's book, Social Theory and Social Structure. Last lecture, we were talking about chapter 4, in which he talks about the idea of creating a sociological oriented theory and research. Today we are going to discuss chapter 5, in which he talks about how research contributes to the development of theory. So when we try to do sociological research and when we have selected a problem to study, what we do is also build a theory before we go to the field. So the theory and research, or theory and field work or empirical data, are connected to each other. So theory contributes to the research, but at the same time research data in a certain way contributes to the development of sociological theory. So today we discuss how research contributes to the development and construction of theory. So chapter 5 of the book, Social Theory and Structure, Merton discusses the evolving relationship between sociological theory and empirical research. It argues that traditional stereotypes of the detached theorist and the fact-gathering researcher are becoming obsolete. So you cannot be an armchair sociologist, just sit in the room and create theory. It is very important as a researcher to be connected to the field, kind of find out what is the empirical reality and how much the theory is enabling us to understand that empirical reality, or whether the empirical reality will further extend the theory. So over the time, over the discourse in sociology, the two roles, that is as a theorist and as a social researcher, have converged, with sociologists increasingly combining both theory and research in their work. This collaboration has led to a greater understanding that theory and research are interconnected and should influence each other. The outdated image of the social theorist high in the sphere of pure ideas and the social researcher focused on isolated fact is no longer accurate. So it's kind of two sides of the same coin. As long as you need to be very updated with the theory, it's very important also to kind of have the data, and that is kind of updated data, empirical content with while looking into the theory. So this role of a theorist and a social researcher have almost converged together, and most of the time now social researchers, the sociologists, have both the role of a theorist as well as a researcher. Now this dual specialization has led to more integrated approach. The interaction between theory and empirical research has become a reality, not just an ideal. This allows for a substantive discussion of the relationship based on actual practice rather than just what should happen. While many discussions have focused on the role of theory in research, Merton intends to explore the reverse relationship, that is, the role of empirical research in the development of social theory. Robert Merton delves into how data and findings from research studies can shape, refine, and advance sociological ideas and framework. Empirical research has a more active and significant role in shaping social theory than is commonly acknowledged. So earlier, before Merton, much of the preference or weightage was given to theory. The theory is good, the research will come out to be excellent, but it's a reverse as well. If your data is kind of valid and authentic and you have a huge set of data, then the data from that analysis of the data, you can contribute to the redefining research or even creating new theories. So Merton's central thesis is that research doesn't passively test or verify existing hypotheses. Instead, it actively does four tasks, and that is, it initiates, reformulates, deflects, and clarifies theory. So these four, initiate, reformulate, deflect, and clarify, is kind of contributing to the shaping on kind of making theories more relevant. Merton begins by critiquing the common yet oversimplistic view that the sole purpose of empirical research is to test hypotheses. Now, this was an assumption. So, initially, to Merton's idea, it was that what is research? The research is a testing of hypothesis. So, you go to the field with a hypothesis and your data either proves that hypothesis as true or false. Now, Merton is moving a step ahead and says the role is not just to falsify or kind of prove your hypothesis. The traditional model where hypothesis is formed, inferences are drawn, and then the hypothesis is either confirmed or refuted, is presented as a logical model, not a realistic description of how research actually happens. He critiques the traditional model. The model that you kind of test hypothesis as valid or invalid is not the kind of research or not the kind of relation between theory and research that happens in sociology. And he contends that this model distorts the research experience by first abstracting from the temporal sequence of events. It ignores the messy, non-linear process of discovery. So, it is exaggerating some amount of data that it has collected through the technique of data collection, and this data is exaggerating the role of explicit theory. It suggests that theory always comes first, minimizing the creative, unexpected insight that can arise directly from observation. So, when we are over changing, transformation is taking place and we are into new area realms where not much studies has been done or they kind of, so we can have data collection from these areas, new areas, and at times we will not be very clear. It could be messy data, it could be in the process of discovering new theory. So, rather than exaggerating a set of data, it is important to go into the unexplored data. The second task that he talks about is it minimizes the creative role of observation. It fails to account for the psychological and creative dimension of research, which are often overlooked in the formal logical way research is typically reported. To move beyond this limited view, the author proposes 4 specific ways in which empirical research actively contributes to the development of social theory. First, initiate theory. So, research findings can lead to the formation of entirely new theories. Number 2, reformulate theory. Data from research can force a re-evaluation and modification of existing theories. So, we have theories on family, which was kind of earlier saying evolutionary pattern of change from joint family to nuclear, and then AMSA's study of the Gujarat family comes out with a new set of data which changes, which questions this evolutionary approach and kind of gives us the idea of the composition of the family. The composition is changing. So, it is important to understand that how it is giving us new ideas, it is reformulating the existing theory. The third is that it deflects theory. Data from unexpected research can cause the direction of theoretical inquiry to shift from away from the previous path. That is, researchers go to the field with a set of ideas to explore a pattern, to understand structures, but in the process of data collection, it kind of moves away and gives us a new area of research and theory. The fourth, it clarifies theory. Researcher provides the detail and specificity needed to make abstract theoretical concepts more precise and understandable. So, we will now discuss how Merton explains the 4 role of the researcher and how research contributes to reformulation, clarification and construction of theory. First, he talks about the serendipity pattern. Now, what is serendipity pattern? According to Merton, the serendipity pattern is a crucial way empirical research contributes to social theory. This pattern occurs when a researcher unexpectedly finds a surprising and significant piece of data that was not the original focus of the study. This surprising discovery then prompts the researcher to develop a new theory or extend an existing one to account for the new finding. The serendipity pattern is defined by three main characteristics of unexpected finding. It is unanticipated, so the researcher enters the field with a certain set of objective, but through the data, unexplored data or certain messy data, it is kind of leading to another kind of understanding, theory, pattern. So, it leads to the discovery of byproduct of research aimed at testing a different hypothesis. It is an observation that was not sought after when the study began. Second, it is anomalous. The finding is surprising because it appears to be inconsistent with existing theories or established fact. This inconsistency is what captures the researcher's attention and sparks curiosity. Third, it is strategic. The datum is significant because it provides a fertile ground for developing a new theory. It is not just a random oddity, but a piece of information that has broader theoretical implication. In a sense, the serendipity pattern highlights how research isn't just about confirming what we already suspect. It's a dynamic process where unexpected observation can be the driving force for creating new knowledge and shaping the way theories we use to understand the world. Now, he explains the serendipity pattern by using the case study of Crafttown. And this is a scientific study which was done in Crafttown, a suburban housing community. Here, the researcher initially observed two facts. A large number of residents, particularly those with young children, were joining civic and political organization. This behavior seemed to contradict the common sense notion that parents of young children, especially low income bracket, are tied down and can't participate in outside group activities. When the researcher asked the resident about this, they explained it was easy to find teenage babysitters, claiming there were many more teenagers in Crafttown than in their previous neighborhood. This explanation would have been sufficient, but the researcher uncovered a disturbing datum. The objective data showed that Crafttown actually had a very small proportion of adolescents. The ratio of adolescent to children under 10 was 1:10, directly contradicting the resident belief in the abundance of teenage sitters. This unanticipated and anomalous finding, the illusion of an abundance of teenager, is a classic example of serendipity pattern. It forces the researcher to question the initial assumption and redirect the inquiry to understand why such a widely held yet factually incorrect belief exists. An unexpected research finding in Crafttown was that residents held a strong but factually incorrect belief that there was an abundance of teenage babysitter. This finding was a classic example of what Merton terms as serendipity pattern in research. Merton explains that this observation was both unanticipated and anomalous. It wasn't something the researcher had set out to find. He argues that such a seemingly trivial observation can become a strategic fact, a fact that can lead to the development of new theory. If this fact, which was unexpected, is used to develop a new theoretical insight, just as Freud used his misreading of a newspaper headline to explore deeper psychological concepts. Merton poses the central question: what made this false belief so widespread and persistent, if not for a deliberate effort to spread it? So, he is basically trying to say that the field work or the empirical often leads to the rejection of the propaganda material or explanation. So, Merton challenges a common sociological explanation for such a phenomena, which attributes false belief to the calculated handiwork of vested interest spreading propaganda. This approach, rooted in utilitarian theory, assumes someone must benefit from the belief. However, author dismisses this theory for the Crafttown case because there were no special interest group seeking to misrepresent the age distribution of the community. This rejection of the most obvious explanation forces the inquiry to take a new direction, compelling the researcher to seek a more complex, non-utilitarian source for the social illusion. While several general sociological theories offer useful points of departure for understanding a social illusion, they fail to provide specific explanations. Merton lists several influential theories. First is Karl Marx's postulate, the social existence determine their consciousness. Second, Durkheim's theorem, collective representation reflect a social reality even if not objectively. Sheriff thesis, social factors influence perception in the unstructured situation. So, all these are kind of theory which are kind of creating a propaganda set of understanding. So, what we basically do is have a kind of social location of the theoretical instant to determine which perspective it is trying to influence. So, these influential theories of Marx, Durkheim are kind of a general orientations. These are suggestive. They are not specific enough to explain the particular illusion observed in, say, the area where you are studying. So, they are generalized understanding. So, if you look into Durkheim's study of suicide, it is not that everywhere integration could be responsible for lack of integration leading to suicide. It could be another explanation of suicide. So, the general theory kind deflect from the specific research and the empirical data. So, these generalized theories do not specify which element of social existence, social reality or social locations are responsible for the false belief. This highlights the need to move away from broad abstract theory to a more concrete and detailed analysis to solve the specific research problem at hand. The sociological illusion in Crafttown, the belief in an abundance of teenage babysitter, was a direct result of the community's social structure, not the statistical reality. Merton explains the phenomena as follows. Number 1, social cohesion. Residents recently from a more anonymous urban environment were now in a community where proximity led to reciprocal intimacies. This high level of social cohesion meant they were merely more likely to know their neighbors, including teenagers. So, second is perception and trust. The resident perceptions of available teenager was not based on the actual number of adolescents in the community. Instead, their belief was a function of confidence. They perceived only those teenagers they knew personally and could trust to supervise their children. So, even if the number was less, they had this qualitative dimension where even if they were 4 adolescent, the individual could trust them and they could kind of hire them for that work, and it is kind of again moving away from data, statistics. The third, he says, the byproduct of relations. The illusion was an unwitting deflection of the high social cohesion. In a sense, the perception was not of statistic fact, but of a dense network of trustworthy, familiar individuals. Merton concludes that this strategic finding fits into and extends the theory that social perception is a byproduct of the structure of human relations rather than a simple assimilation of norms from others. So, through this serendipity pattern or the research of the Craft Town, where there was a false belief, they are new findings, and these findings of social cohesion, trust, the social relation exemplifies that an unexpected findings can lead to new and valuable theoretical insight. The second task of research in terms of theory is the recasting of theory. Empirical research extends theory not just through unexpected findings, but also through the repeated observation of neglected fact. This process, which Merton calls the reformulation pattern, introduces new variables into an existing theoretical framework. Unlike the serendipity pattern, which focus on anomalies that contradict a theory, the reformulation pattern centers on hitherto neglected but relevant facts. These facts are not inconsistent with a theory. They simply haven't been considered pertinent or important. So, every researcher enters the field with a set of objective or with a theoretical framework. So, they only focuses on data that satisfy that objective, and in that process a number of data are considered as insignificant. Now, if we look into these insignificant data, or a second kind of visit to the field leads to new kind of theory or reformulation of theory. Here Merton explains this reformulation of theory by giving Malinowski's example. When a series of these facts consistently appears, it presses researchers to extend and reformulate their conceptual scheme to include them. The text uses Malinowski's work on the magic among the Trobriand islander as a prime example. Malinowski observed that the islanders did not use magic when fishing in the safe, predictable lagoon. Why? Because he said magic functioned to kind of overcome the unknown, the unpredictable, something which was dangerous and they could not predict. However, the islanders practiced magic during open sea fishing, which was dangerous and had an uncertain outcome. These repeated observation of a neglected fact, the relationship between magic and uncertainty, led Malinowski to reformulate existing theories of magic. His new theory proposed that magic serves to bridge uncertainty, fortify confidence, and reduce anxiety in the face of uncontrollable hazard. So, this was not a test of an old theory, but the development of a new, more comprehensive one based on suggestive empirical data. So, when we read Robert Merton's book Social Theory and Social Structure, chapter 5, we see that he is giving us the important task that research does in form of discovering new theories and also reformulating the theory. So, with this I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.